the fourth talk of the Unlocking Digital Humanities series. Due to technical problems, it's a bit ironic, but Google has some special features sometimes. In any case, I'm very, very pleased that Marie-Claire and Christopher Leckwell talked about undergrad research, meaningful undergrad research today, and how to create research data by using undergraduates as not only as cheap labor, but also in a way that the undergrads actually learn a lot by creating research data. And so, without further ado, Marie-Claire, please.
Thanks, Thomas. So I would like to start by talking about.
You share your screen.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem.
Let's do that. So I would like to start by defining the terms. And what I mean here is what are we talking about when we talk about undergraduate research, right? I think everything here should be prefaced by the fact that I was specifically hired by Tufts to conduct undergraduate research and to help our students participate in the elaboration of new knowledge. So that's always been a great goal of mine, and I think it's also a great goal of this department here. And it certainly is a great goal of the Perseus project, which I am co-leader of. So, when we talk about student research in the humanities, what do they usually do? We think about the sempiternal term paper, poster presentations. On occasion, people do that. Undergraduate conferences, journals, so our more enterprising undergrad students will go to such conferences or publish articles in undergraduate research journals. So all of this is well and good, and we have been assessing it for ages with the same good old methods, right? So grades according to a more or less defined grading set, depending on the professor, right? We talk about GPAs, we talk about written or oral feedback that we give to our students, and we certainly do advising. So all of this really sort of defines how student research, especially undergraduate student research, is conducted. And the question that really we are asking is how can we go beyond that, and how can we have students produce research alongside their professors? And in the background, of course, there are the big questions that our age is facing, namely the abundance of materials to do research on. So I will talk later about manuscripts, but we have, of course, a really, really large amount of manuscripts that are now in the public domain. They are digitized. They're just waiting to be dealt with. We have inscriptions, and I will mention that later, and of course, plethora of other such data that's just really waiting to be dealt with. And if we leave it to the scholars individually in their own offices and so on, that work will never get done. So the problem is really twofold. How do we get students to do real research? And on the other hand, how do we get all this work done? And the answer, of course, is that we want to collaborate to do all this. And we want to collaborate, but in meaningful ways, right? So we want to follow the standards of the discipline. And I am a classicist, but many other disciplines have similar criteria as we do. So we're thinking about language and different standards for our publication. We're talking about also being in line with the history of the discipline and so on, right? So we want to make sure that our undergraduate research is going to be respectful of this. We also want research to be reproducible, which is really, really important, and I think that's something that is only too rarely emphasized in the humanities. We want our experiments to be such that any person who wants to evaluate the results we got can and has access to the data to reproduce the results that we got. So that's an important point. Peer-reviewed, we also know that that's in academia generally how we ensure quality, right? So what does peer review mean here? How do we affect that? How do we subject our students to peer review, and what does that mean? And finally, we want publication, and that can take many forms, and I will talk about this briefly, but this is one of the great challenges that we all face in the digital humanities, right? How do we disseminate this, and how also do we make things stand the test of time, right? We can't just put websites out there hoping that things stay. So as I said, the answer, as far as I'm concerned, is collaborative research. So Perseids, I mentioned briefly. Perseids is a sub-project of the Perseids Digital Library. It's a collaborative online editing environment which is built from existing open source tools and services. And that second line here is really, really important. Existing and open source are the keywords, right? So our value is to not reinvent the wheel wherever possible. We reuse anything that we can, tools, software, methods, etc. And of course, we reshare everything as well. Open source, as I mentioned earlier, I think is really critical here so that everyone has access and everyone can contribute and also assess the quality of the work. So complete transparency is what we're aiming for here. The data is first, meaning that we want to produce quality data that can go out there and be reused by others. And also, of course, that can be preserved. So we have stable identifiers and serializations according to standard data formats. So our students produce data-driven analysis and transparent analysis. So I will be talking about manuscript editing. So the transparency question here really comes from the fact that your audience has access to the original manuscript at any point in time, right? So they look at what you did. It's not just trust me, that's what it says. It's here it is, and here's what I think it says, right? Machine actionable data, of course, reusable data sets, etc. So I will show in concrete terms what that means. Now, many of us think, well, how does that work in real life in the classroom, right? We're teachers, and we wonder how that classroom is set up, right? So we set it up as collaborative instead of top-down, and I think that's a really crucial feature, right? Instead of being in front of my classroom and saying to the students, here's the answer, I will sit with them and look with them, knowing that I don't necessarily know the answers, and possibly nobody does, right? But we can at least begin to find out together. And that's been really a great experience so far for me. I've been teaching this way for many years now, and the results, first of all, I think are very convincing, but also the experience of teaching that way, right? So I'm learning all the time rather than repeating my faded old spiel all the time. So that makes me very happy and very stimulated as a professor. Grading is iterative. So as I said earlier, right, the usual way that our students produce research and have it assessed is they produce a term paper at the very end of the term, and usually they write it at the very last minute, and we grade it at the very last minute before grades are due. I think everyone knows that. However, how are you going to assess something that is new research? It's new information. There's no set answers. Nobody knows the truth, right? There are multiple truths possibly, and we want to think about what that. Then what does that mean for this particular student at this particular moment, right? So instead of taking an approach of we turn everything in at the end of the semester and that's that, we turn things in iterations. So we start from the very first week of the semester, and students produce installments, and they have dates where they have milestones to meet, right? So your first transcription should come at this date, and then I give you feedback, and second transcription, and so on, right? So the grading really takes a back seat to how much have we accomplished here, and that's really the criterion that I use, because not every student is going to make the same amount of progress, but then again, not every student is faced with the same problems. It's problem solving here, and what I try to assess is how does that contribute? How has this person helped our knowledge in doing what they did, right? So it doesn't matter to me if a student makes less progress than another, so long as they did make progress, right? So I think that's been really encouraging for the students, and also for me, it prompts me, right, to give feedback that's useful rather than just say, well, that's B work. But that doesn't mean much, right? What's important is, okay, this could be better, but this is really good, and this is useful, and we can build on this, right? So that's what my feedback looks like usually. And I give extensive feedback as part of this approach. And learning by doing, right? So as part of this iterative approach, we think, well, students have time to make mistakes, and that's really important, because if we're honest, we all make mistakes, and when we make a publication in some journal or whatever, we have multiple drafts, we show it to our colleagues, we circulate it to get feedback, and then once we submit it to the journal, they will usually give us feedback, and then that goes through several revisions as well. So I feel that we should really give the students the opportunity to do the same, and that definitely cuts down on stress for them, and is a real motivating factor, right? It's work that stays, and it's work that's of use to the community. And I can honestly say that my students have produced the best work I've seen ever in my teaching, right? So I'm very happy, and I think it's really worth the extra work, because yes, absolutely, that's extra work, but it's completely worth it. So in the process, students learn about best practices. So that's what I tell them, right? Why do we have to learn XML? Why do we have to learn this and that? Well, I tell them that's how the professionals do it, and those are best practices that are around, and that's just why you learn it, right? And that's what I would think a student comes to the university to learn, is how do you do it for real, not just for some term paper or something. And students in the course of this participate in the creation of knowledge, further development of the tools. So that's one thing also to mention, that the tools we put out there are also all at some stage of development, right? So as we do this work, we get an opportunity to get feedback from the students to improve, to find bugs, all kinds of things that really help us further our own research on the tools. So it's an approach that has advantages on every side. And here I put development of new curricula, because I think that's really crucial from the standpoint of pedagogy, is that as I teach these classes, I get an opportunity to think about it with my colleagues. We get to coordinate across multiple courses and multiple departments. And we get to think or rethink how we teach our materials. So I think that's really great to have the students actually involved in the process of their own education, rather than just follow some kind of path that's already traced for them. They get to be active participants in their own process of education. So concretely, what does that look like? And here I'm going to switch to a live demo. So I spoke about manuscripts, and I want to have a shout out to my colleagues here from Tisch Library who are in the room. This is thanks in large part to your hard work that we're able to show this. So this is the miscellany collection, and now I'm sure I'm not going to do it justice as far as historical books is concerned, but it is a set of manuscript leaves that's preserved in the special collection here in Tisch Library. You can see that there are many from a great span in time. So our earliest manuscript dates from the 12th century. It is this one here. And we go all the way to the 19th century with printed books. Most of the leaves that we have here are in Latin. We have, I think, one or two in German, a couple in Italian, and I believe one in French. But my class, since 2013, has been working on the medieval Latin part of this collection. And students have been editing and transcribing and translating those manuscripts. And I'd like to reiterate that we did all of this thanks to the support of our wonderful library team. So we started in 2013 with a workflow that was really manual, involved Word documents and PDFs. It was really just a trial period. We were sort of blazing the trail. How can we do this, and so on. So you can see that we've got diplomatic editions done in Unicode characters as best we could, this sort of thing, right? And we've got normalized editions as well as, as well as translations and commentaries that the students wrote. Now, it's really fun research to do. So this particular piece, this 12th century missal fragment, at first, when we started in 2013, it wasn't exactly known what the contents of this was. So it's really by having the students painstakingly go through this document, and I can show you the detailed view of it. You can see that it's cut on 3 sides, and the hand is not exactly easy if you've never worked with this. We've got musical notation. I can show you that. And various other lovely features on this. I think the musical notation might be on the other side. Anyway, so by having the students work on this, they determined that parts of it were sermons from Pope Leo the Great and various other pieces that we found out. Other students working on different manuscripts found out that what was taught to be the obverse was really the reverse, and various other such information that is important in cataloging and preserving and understanding these objects. And in the meantime, our librarians and an art history student were able to make progress on thinking about the collection as a whole, where it came from, what can we say about it as a collection. So all of this work is really collaborative in so many ways. So we continued this work, and when Perseids came online, we started using Perseids to do this work. So all that's required is to create a completely free account on Perseids. And what you do is then come here on your home screen, and these are preloaded into Perseids. So I can show this, for instance. I'm going to create a new edition of this particular leaf of Valerius Maximus. So I have a new transcription document here, and I'm going to go XML. So I'd like to say that we've been doing these transcription using Epidoc XML standards, which has worked well for us. The level of description that's available in XML is useful for such documents, so we have found it beneficial for our purposes. So how does this work concretely? So let's say you are faced with transcribing this leaf. We chunk things by word. You could do it by character, or however by line, however your research question demands. So I'm creating regions of interest here around words, and I'm just going to click on that and then translate. Not translate, but transcribe. So here I'm going to transcribe this. All right. So here I go. And in the meantime, the computer has calculated the coordinates of these images, which I'm going to grab and put in the XML document below. So let's say I'm going to do that and then save. So what I've done now is created a link between image and text. And that's my earlier point about transparency, right? So if someone wants to verify that I've transcribed this, they can go in this screen here, double click on the word, and if the gods of Perseids are in a good mood that day.
I think it's there, it's just that the resolution is so low, it's hard to get down.
Oh, that's possible. Well, it's there. The user can see the region of interest that I've associated with that bit of text, right? So that is where our transparency comes in. So maybe I might be able to get it to work.
Yeah, try again, but you may need to just do Control- to make the browser smaller.
Yeah.
We can get it to come into view. I think it's in there, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It may not be.
That's okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. I can always show a different one actually that I did a couple days ago.
Control++ to get back to the normal view.
Yeah, it's all right. All right. Oh, this one has nothing in it. That's lovely. Anyway, so that was my simple point about this text transcription workflow. So as I said, so I'm going to get back to the slides now. We use Epidoc, and one of the reasons we chose this standard is because it focuses on materiality and the history of texts, and so we want to look at the document in great detail. So Epidoc offered us this opportunity. So you can see actually what an Epidoc transcription of this particular passage, all its different passage, would look like. And there's the preview, so when it works, that's what it looks like. Right? So you click on but it does work. So there we go. Here's another view of that. And and we're also using CTS URNs as stable identifiers for these publications. So that's the same point. And the regions of interest also have URNs, so they can be preserved and pointed at with a web browser, for instance, right? And all of this forms a publication that then has staying power beyond the semester or beyond some idiosyncratic publication. So I want to just finish what I was saying by saying that this workflow has also been used in my Greek class, and what you see here on this slide is the result of that Greek class. So in that case, we were using the same editing workflow to work with Greek inscriptions. And as I said earlier, one of our values is to recontribute to the community. And so that's what we're doing here. In this particular case, we used a workflow that our colleagues, Josh Sosin and Gabriel Baudard, have been using on Flickr, sort of aggregating pictures of Greek inscriptions. So we had the students find Greek inscriptions on Flickr, transcribe and edit them on Perseids, and then recontribute their findings on Flickr. And we see here an interaction with the user who had originally posted this picture to Flickr. And we can see the value added directly here. You have this person going on an archaeological site, taking a picture. I love this, it's great. And the students saying, well, here's what it means, right? So you have direct engagement of the students in the scientific community, because as you can see, they give us here a link to the inscription catalog, right? So we're making a direct link to a reference work in classics, but also contributing directly to the community of people who just want to know what this means, right? So the students are using their skills directly to do that. So I think that's it for me. I will pass the Herald staff on to Chris Blackwell now. So I guess I just go here, yep.
So Thomas, should I unmute? Should I?
Marie-Claire mutes herself. You can unmute.
Aren't you flip?
I will unmute you and mute Marie-Claire.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're not muted anymore, Chris.
Okay. So, all right. So I will share my screen.
Yep.
Let's just share entire screen.
Looks good.
And okay. Great. So I just wanted to follow up on some of the points Marie-Claire made and give one other example of this kind of work from my experience. And my experience is almost entirely informed by things that were born here at Tufts and have been promoted here at Tufts and brought to such a high level. So it's always a great honor to be here at the mothership, whence all good things flow. My particular project is the Homer multitext, and it's a project that is under the editorship of Casey Dewey, who's a professor of classics at the University of Houston, and Mary Ebbett, who's a professor of classics at the College of the Holy Cross. My role in the project is with Neil Smith, who's also at Holy Cross. We are the project architects, or the plumbers, of the Homer multitext. This is an ongoing, open-ended exploration of the tradition of Greek epic poetry. It was born out of a desire to test ideas about the oral origins of these poems as compositions in performance that evolved out of a tradition of poetic performance over 1,000 years. And our most specific work has been with the true primary sources for everything we can hope to know about the Iliad and the Odyssey, which is the Byzantine manuscript witnesses. We have started with this one. This is the Venetus A. It's a 10th century manuscript. It's the oldest complete manuscript of the Iliad. It's also the coolest and best. It's enormous. You can see on the and complicated. We have a poetic text here, and then the scholia, the commentary around the margins, and it's all carefully planned. Different regions contain different kinds of commentary text. So this isn't just somebody's annotation. This is, I like to say, this is state-of-the-art information technology from 950 of the Common Era, right? Like, how can we integrate everything we know about Homer and the Iliad into one artifact, in one convenient package? So this has never been thoroughly edited, and obviously before our era, our technologically enhanced era of scholarship, it would be almost impossible to do justice to this. It's also huge. There are 367 folios, so multiply that by 2 for pages. And so, as Marie-Claire said, the only hope is collaboration. And so we collaborate. And most of our work, and this is in Tufts University, the only place I come to, and this is the boring thing to say, right? All of the work is on GitHub, right? Like every other place, then you have to stop and explain like GitHub and like, wonder. But of course here, like everything I've seen is going on in GitHub at Tufts. So this is cool. We can look at, this is the HMT editors repo on GitHub, just to get an idea. These are all the teams that are working, currently working. Gustavus Adolphus, University of Leiden, University of Washington, Holy Cross, Furman, my institution, University of Houston, and the vast majority of the contributions to the Homer multitext have been by undergraduates. Right? And so in this project, the sort of professional scholars, Casey and Mary, their jobs are to be great Homerists, which they are, and to have a big understanding of the project. Neil's job and my job really is to make tools that let the editors do the scholarly work. So I wanted to show particularly, because our title is Valid and Verified, how we, I think we do this and then do it again, how some of the ways we can manage this to ensure that, as Mary Claire said, that the work satisfies the three requirements that we need: that it's reproducible, that it's subject to validation, and it's subject to verification. And those last two terms sometimes get used sort of interchangeably, but we have a very precise definition for these. Validation is something an automated process can do, a machine process. Verification requires a human intellect. And these two can go hand in hand. So to help our over 100 undergraduate collaborators work, we have to give them a bunch of tools, and this is, in the past, was extremely complicated because we had to set them up on their computers. Now we just give them all a virtual machine image, and everybody runs a little Linux computer on their laptop that has everything pre-installed and configured. And so if I were a Homer multi-text editor, I would be running this virtual machine, and I would log in, and this is my students' account on here where they've checked out their work from on one folio of the manuscript, and they, when they've done some work, they run this script, and it's going to take a minute, so I'm going to go back and talk about a couple other things while this thing runs. Validation. The first kind of validation that we do is what we call the DSE triangle. DSE is Digital Scholarly Editions. And we think that a 21st century scholarly edition of a manuscript has these three parts. There's the physical artifact, there's the documentary evidence for it in the form of a digital image, and then there's the transcribed text. So the first kind of validation is ensuring the integrity of that, where the script will go and look at everything the students have typed and make sure that every citable passage of text that they've transcribed is associated with a region of interest on the image, as Maria Claire showed, and with the particular folio on the manuscript where it resides. It might be wrong, right? And so that's where the verification comes. And one of our principles is just to avoid the paradox or the foolishness of the idea of proofreading, right? Like, proofreading is essentially doing the same activity that produced the error the first time and expecting it to catch the error the second time. And so we always try for verification to have alternate approaches to things. And so this is a little visualization tool where they can look at everything they've identified and confirm on this page, and these guys have done a pretty good job, that all of these are Iliad lines, for example, and that the different categories of scholia are all in the right place, and so forth. So this is verification and validation. Let's see how our little script is coming. All right, still chugging away. All right. So that's one thing. The when the script is done, I'm not going to. It'll rebuild this. The other thing it does is go through and actually reads their transcriptions and does the best kind of validation we can on a Byzantine Greek text. It confirms. We don't mark up a lot in our XML files. We basically mark up anything that's not Greek, the assumption that everything else is Greek. So numbers, personal names, and in the commentary text, you often have little, we go word as word. So like, he does not end this word in ace, but in s, right? And so that's not actually Greek, it's just a part of Greek, and so we identify that. And so it says, like, every time you've identified an ethnic name, does it have a valid identifier? Personal names, place names, likewise. And this is where the kind of proofreading thing comes in. So person one in our list of persons is Achilles. So this is the alternate, this is the orthogonal view that lets us proofread. Okay, that's legitimate, and yeah, that's all Achilles. Right? Where we see why you would need, why this is a matter of verification, not validations. Person 485 is Ptolemy the Ascalonite, right? So here, the Ascalonite, Ptolemy, the Ascalonite, right? So this is like where the human verification comes in. Herodian. Also, you know, the crazy declension of the word Zeus, right? Dios, Xenos. Yeah, all Zeus is really good. And then the most interesting thing is this. So my students are not passing all their tests here, so they're not done with this folio. Fail. But they're passing many of them. So it goes through and runs all of their Greek words through a sort of twofold validation test. The first is to ensure that all the characters are actually Greek characters, because Unicode is kind of a train wreck. And there are lots of things that look kind of like a Greek character but aren't a Greek character, and this is really important. Neil cares about this, and I'm glad he does, because it's a nasty, nasty job. You know, there are like 26 kinds of raised dot in Unicode. Only one of them is a Greek semicolon. Obviously, you could never see that. You could never see that looking at it, and so it checks that. Then it tries to parse the Greek, and it either succeeds or it fails. If it succeeds, maybe it's right. You know, and the ultimate test, of course, will be reading the Scholia. If it fails, it'll fail for a few different reasons. The most common is we typed it wrong. And when they fail a test, you go back and look at the manuscript and see why we failed it. And so we can do that. I'm going to not have enough time for that, but you could go back. So I happen to know that this is a hose with a smooth breathing. Because I was looking at this, that's a typo, right? They have messed that up, and they're going to have to fix it. Go back and fix it and rerun the test. Sometimes it fails because of orthography. Okay, according to our modern ancient Greek orthography, we would expect to have a smooth breathing on this letter, maybe an accent, and so forth. And the Byzantine scribes did not follow modern conventions for Greek orthography. When that happens, the students can document and confirm on the manuscript that that's actually what it has. And then we have another GitHub repository where they can say, this is a documented, verified Byzantine orthographic form. It maps to, and then we would have the correct one, and the next time they run the test, it will pass. And some down at the bottom here, you'll see some of these that are, if I can find one, yeah. So here, so hutos with no breathing pass because this is a recognized Byzantine orthographic form. And then the last reason they might fail a test is because it's new vocabulary. It's a new Greek word that's not in our lexicon and maybe has never been seen before by human eyes since the 10th century. And that's pretty cool when the students find that. That's like archaeology, you know, so you don't have to go to some sun-baked hellhole and dig for it. But they have found a certain number of new words. Often it's perfectly clear what they mean. They're compounds or whatever. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's enough from me. Leave it at that, and then have conversations. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, Chris and Maria. And if anybody has any question, please shoot.
I'm curious for what type of feedback you get from your students about this. I mean, on a surface level, whether it's certainly positive or negative, and on a deeper level, whether they come to understand the pedagogy by the end of it.
Do you want to take it first? I would say the feedback is really, really positive. The students appreciate, first of all, that the work carries over from one class to another. So that's been a really important piece there. I've also had feedback in my evaluations. They were saying we really know now what it's like to be a real classicist. So I feel like that's actually was really rewarding for me. Yeah, so that sort of thing, right? So I had one comment saying it's really deep research, but at the same time it doesn't seem daunting. So I think that's really the result of the iterative approach. So feedback is overwhelmingly positive, I would say, and on those terms too, which make me very happy.
I think so. I mean, I think like the Montessori principle, right? Like kids, little kids want to do real stuff,
yes.
right? They would rather make biscuits in the kitchen than play with a toy kitchen set. And I know my students, they can see very clearly this has never been done, and that's a neat feeling. You've read something. Most of those marginal, most of the more interesting marginal comments have never been edited. Because the guy who did the big edition didn't care about mythology, so he just skipped them. And so, when my students read the one about Oedipus's second wife, that was pretty cool, And so, like, finding new Greek mythology is kind of a neat thing for them. Some are daunted by the technology, but that's kind of our job. Is like the old people. Our job is to make it easier, and we. Of course, that's why the Tufts is so important to the whole world of scholarship, because this is where the good stuff comes from.
Did you guys develop, or you have somewhere like the online paleographic handbook the students put together at Holy Cross?
Yeah, I have some difficulty finding that, but I can show you the one that my student Janie Capers has been doing just in the wiki all by herself.
To show, because it helps us see the complexity of the writing system they're dealing with.
Yeah,
how you deal with it.
I can never find the wiki on these things. Here it is. So here's in well, okay, yeah. So so this is just one of my students who's particularly squared away. Janie Capers' new one. Her other hobby is like sailing, racing yachts, and so I think you have to be a kind of awesome person to do that. But this is, and again, these point to regions of interest on an image. This is her personal little library of this very subtle and specific abbreviations that the scribe uses for particular morphological endings on the text, and it'll be like a little mark that's like this, and then if it has the tiniest hook on the end, it's a completely different one. And so she's accumulated this, Ren abbreviation versus man mark, and it's really long.
Are there links there to? Those are site links to a written object, aren't they?
Yeah, those are. Well,
in other words, you can actually see which is the manuscript region of interest.
Yeah, she hasn't gone through. We can do this though. Let's do just home. Let's see the manuscript browser. Look up material by URN. Let's find an image. So let's just see what this one looks like. And it's teeny tiny, but we can see it in context. So this is
the little thing actually on the manuscript.
Yeah. So I lost it. Here we go.
There it is.
Yeah. Oop. And so I don't even remember what that was.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You have a link between these.
Yeah, it's an N. Yeah.
And these students are dealing with not the most transparent writings. It's kind of stuff the graduate students in the past would have been daunted at. And they're working their way at it. They are much better at it than me. Like our students can totally read this stuff because they spend. I know at Holy Cross and at Furman, the tradition is Friday afternoons. The kids get together and work on this. They're not. It's not a class, and it's not for credit, and they're not getting paid. They're just doing it because it's awesome. And they will stay. I'm always the first one out the door. I want to get home on Friday. But they're like, and I'll see from the Git commits, that they were there at 7, 8 o'clock at night, like doing this because it's an awesome puzzle.
Do you have students who continue after graduation? And they may not have gone on to graduate school. Do you have students who are continuing on this one?
We've had a few. It's hard to do by yourself, and in fact, we have a kind of buddy rule that you're not allowed to edit Homer alone. It's like swimming after lunch or something. So Nick Churich is now. They tend to be kind of evangelistic. So Nick Churich was a Holy Cross student. He's doing a Fulbright in Leiden this year, and he is kind of created a Homer multi-text gang. Of course, he is in graduate school. Stephanie is our project manager, and she teaches high school Latin, and she's probably the best editor of Byzantine Homeric manuscripts now living. And she's always the one to answer questions, like whether it's about Greek or technology or whatever. She can do it. And we're talking to one of my students who's about to graduate and may end up here, and he's like has every intention of proselytizing everybody. But nobody has, to my knowledge, nobody has just gone off into a non-academic life and kept doing it.
Can you show like the publications of the Venidus A? I mean, you've been putting out dumps or publications of data.
Yeah.
Can you find them and show them?
Yeah.
So this is the result of what the students have been doing cumulatively over years now.
Yeah. So in the HMT, this is, this is if you get the last published snapshot and unzip it from Git, you get this, and so and we've got a bunch more in the pipeline. So most of the actual work are in the form of these just tables. These are indexed different kinds of indices, indexed passages, indexed according to speeches, and so forth, and then Venidus A editions. So the Venidus A, the Iliad. So this, at the point I downloaded this, it was the first 10 books. But we hope that by the end of 2017, we'll have finished the whole one.
So let's look inside one of those. I know that's going to be crazy, but let's see inside one of the files.
So these are the files that you might want to preserve in a repository.
Yeah. So this is just a TEI. It's a more or less epidoc file, and it looks kind of busy, but we try to be as light as possible on the markup and do everything outside of it.
Now, it doesn't seem like we have yet, and I think you know that, or maybe I'm misreading. We don't have a really smooth way of showing in an attractive fashion the results of the work as it comes out. We got this. And you can put it into a system. We're all working on figuring out how it's just immediately obvious in an attractive, sort of intuitive fashion. I think students all appreciate their stuff that's in this format. It's so complicated, it's got to be sustainable. But we haven't. For me, that's one of the big, it's a big question. We haven't solved it here either. I mean, nobody has.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a nice example. That's how.
Yeah, so
the presentation. So presentation.
That's right. So you've got and you can deal with really crazy, complicated writing artifacts. Now that is the text. That's Homer with the interlinear scholia, correct?
no, that's just the poetic text. What you want to see? Let me show you.
The red and the what?
Yeah, let me show you the thing you actually want to see. You want to see this view. So this is the view that you want to see, where for some reason on this one we don't have the individual Homeric lines. I don't know why that's the case, but so here you've got the transcription. It's like the kind of obvious thing to do is to show. It's a nice note about Aristarchus. So, but yeah, it's laborious to get from the XML stuff to integrate all this. And this is not the world's most beautiful user interface. And I know because I've made it, and it's sort of terrible, but that's, you know, that's the other thing is, you know, if we get good enough at all this, that then we can really, then it becomes appropriate to spend the resources to have nice presentations. But while we're still figuring out how to do this, it doesn't make a lot of sense to.
Yeah, I think that the basic, I think I would disagree. I think it's time to push on this, and I think that while there's separation of concerns, we're all a lot better at the back end than we are on the front end.
Yeah.
And I think that you need to start to really pushing and saying, what is it going to look like? How am I going to experience? What's the user? What logical user experiences can we have? Because that's going to percolate back to the deep architecture inevitably, because there's going to be semantic things you're going to learn, things you haven't thought about. And we've been at it for years, so it's time. So that, and you know, every time, you know, when I press the button submit, like with my tree banking in my class, that should show up in Perseus, for example, or in some place. It's not, we're a long way from there. I mean, we should, when I'm reading Homer, I should see all of this crap, you know, if I want to. It should be aggregatable. I think this is, I say this because I think it's time to start getting some resources to do it.
Yeah. Like that feature I always turn off in my Kindle app where I can see everybody else's highlights, which I never want to see anybody else's highlights, but it would be useful for something like this.
Yeah, well, I mean, we need to get this stuff out there. I mean, I'm asking pushing on this a little bit because we have an opportunity for a little planning grant with Mellon. And I don't think we need to spend all the money on travel. And I think, but I don't want to put money into development or writing code is not enough. But I'm really to the point of getting someone who's sort of like obstinately interesting, sort of like a good user experience person to like push us.
Yeah.
And sign for wireframes and mock-ups. I mean, what would it look like if you actually did this? And
yeah.
Someone who could really just say, well, you know, you're a shrink. What do you really mean by this? What do you really want to do? What does that mean? And we kind of dog it. And then we could, because that's the big, I think this is, the better job we can do with that, the more we can propagate this.
I think this is a good time to do that. The danger of doing that at the outset of a project is there's enormous temptation to compromise your scholarly principles in service of making an app. But now with the tree banking stuff, with all of Maria Claire's stuff, we've got the body of data has so much inertia that there's no temptation to change our editorial practices just to make it more convenient to jam it onto iPhone or something.
Well, it's the separate. Well, they're going to throw information away to get it on your iPhone, but the information's there.
Yeah.
And now we're at the point where you have enough separation of. That's separation of concerns.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean that's the difference. That's like an LIS model, right? You have a difference between the archival information package and the display information package. You never throw all the archival information into display information.
Right.
It's overwhelming to everyone. Right.
Utterly tedious.
Yeah, yeah. But you make decisions, right? And you say, this is what we want to present to the world. This is how we want to make people aware of it. Yeah.
So how does
I was just gonna say it's important to keep it separate because I always say you don't want your interface to drive the implementation of your standard.
Now, Chris, I'm going to get all wonky or buzzwordy and say, so what's the relation? So here you've got using Google Maps essentially a mechanism to deal with your regions of interest in a way that's regions of interest in a nice clean format. You can analyze them and you can deal with them. What's the relationship between what you've got here and us being able to do something with a more, you know, something like IIIF, you know, which might give us
we put the site image service together in like 2008. It is very, very close. Actually, one of my summer plans is after I'm done with the thing I'm doing now, is to redo that and make it fully IIIF. So one thing you want to be able to do is generate a manifest, a IIIF manifest from any of our collections. And then it's awesome because we can have much better tools for working with the images, and the images become more discoverable and whatever. So that's we're really close now. And the only reason we're not there yet is that IIIF isn't actually a done standard, and we did this before it was a thing. So, but it's not. There is no reason it would be difficult for us just to be able to get the like IIIF badge.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the way the data is structured, clearly it's just a question of fiddling it around a little bit.
Yeah.
Chris, I have a question about the digital scholarly edition triangle.
Yes.
Yeah. So you said that one of the things is that the proof that the manuscript has been there as the digital image. There,
Some kind of documentation.
some kind of, so it's a collation from the 19th century, that would be fine as well. What do you do with right issues? I mean, we still have a lot of manuscript locked up.
Don't touch them.
Don't touch them. So
Do something else.
Do something else, not this manuscript.
Yeah, I mean, it's, no.
Should probably try to
It's
run
just
in the Vatican or something.
yeah. Well, it's like my approach to, like, the inconvenience of shopping in a grocery store in Oregon when I was in South Carolina. It's like, I just don't. This is too, but, and we've got, we spent about 10 years on this one manuscript. We've got 6 more stacked up before we have to start looking around for something else to do. And so that.
Well, there are 4 million Latin students and pupils out there, so the ones that,
but there are lots of good ones that, all the e-codices ones are just waiting.
That's true.
So for this one, you had special privileges from the archive?
Yeah, it was Casey, bless her heart, spent 6 years writing them letters, including letters in Latin. And it was the right combination of her persistence and Count Zorzi, who was the previous librarian, who thought it would be cool. And so we got a Creative Commons license on those. And a subsequent librarian did not fully understand everything, and we had kind of a conversation about that, but it was too late.
Sorry, again, I have a question. So you would accept a collation from the 19th century, a digital image of a collation for a missing manuscript, but you wouldn't accept a TIXML transcription of a manuscript that is in the Vatican and not accessed.
Well, I mean, I don't have power to accept.
No. In your validation
process. Marie brought up the idea of falsifiability, right? If I'm saying this is a transcription of a manuscript, somebody should be able to say no, it's not.
Yeah.
And so if the best you had is somebody else's transcription, sure, that's the best you can. If you really want that thing, I think you should do whatever it takes. But
I mean, there's an intellectual principle here, and I was noticing the Oxford Classical, Oxford starting to put out its editions in issue form, and they're commercial advertising to make money. They emphasize the great authority, the famous authority of their work. And authority is the enemy of scholarship. It is the antithesis of scholarship and of science, which must be transparent and presented for observation by all eyes, which will be the opening of my STV lecture at Oxford in May in philological. And so there's a principle. I mean, there's only so many problems you can work on, and sure you can deal with all. We're cranking through all these damn critical editions, so we have something with errors and some level of errors, because we got to get something to text mine, and something to start with, and their data of a sort. And my colleagues would say they're not proper because they're 99.95 accurate, or the 99.5 accurate, or whatever the contract was. I'd say they're not scholarship because they're not linked to the primary sources, the documents upon which they are based. which is a more profound thing. So pragmatically, you have an unbounded set of material upon, well, it's like, this is a problem we had in Perseus 30 years ago. Starting out, we had to build Perseus, we had a Greek art, for example. And we have to have, if you picked the Cleophrades painter vase that everybody used, you couldn't get. But there are 5 other Cleophrades painter vases that are comparably interesting. You use those. The amount of material out there to keep you busy. So if you say, this is what I'm going to do, and then I'm going to do that whether or not the bastards give me this access to the data, you're screwed. If you say, phrase the question, what can I do with the data already free to me? Then the amount of the space of the problem space is unbounded from the standpoint of human existence. Just like the universe is unbounded, because you'll never get to the next star. And I think you want to make, you establish a process that puts pressure on people to open up their data ultimately. By making, and I've always wanted to have like a CC license award and give it to the Marciano for the Homeric manuscript and have invite the librarian to have like our Bundestag member give him a big, salute or whatever. And then have him say, oh yes, I love this all along.
But it's not a question of authority in this case. So to say that again, but if we have an 18th century collection of a manuscript that burned down, and we know that we have a record of this manuscript, and we only have this collation, and we have a digital image of it, it will pass the validation test. If I have a manuscript on my own in the Vienna library or something else, take it out, type it into my laptop, and then something happens to this manuscript page, and I only have the XDI XML file, it wouldn't pass the validation because there's no image attached to it.
Yeah, but you're relying on the authority of you're relying on the authority of the manuscript. The manuscript you've got, that's a copy of something else. So at some level, it ends.
It's always, we're always approaching, the ideal asymptotically. And so, in this particular validation that we wrote as a bespoke thing for this one manuscript, like it assumes, that we have these images because it does. And there, the important thing is, since we know we have the images, we just know that because they're there. The important thing is, as the editors work, making sure that they're doing that. Anything is valid only according to the terms, the formal terms of the validation. And so the lexical entity validation is, so they typed a word that parses as Greek, it passes. It doesn't mean it's right.
That's true.
And so, but at least we can say, like, this is valid according to these terms. And so at least somebody else can know what not to have to do, right? And so somebody else can go actually read it and make sure it's right. So, obviously lost manuscripts, ready of the manuscript, whatever.
I mean, it's for the editing environment you have set up, that's a perfect validation. So because you have all the images. But I just wanted to stress this, that it's not always, of course you shouldn't, it's ideal if you have open access to manuscripts and that the ideal state will always show, but there's still important evidence out there that it's still scholarly and that we should still, if we get serious with putting it into our editions, should still implement in our editions. And so the ideal state of validation is not always the best way to get the scholarship out there.
Well, I think the point is you have to do something that answers your particular research question, right? And there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all.
Yeah.
And nobody is looking for that. In my opinion, nobody should, right? We're all trying to answer questions. We're trying to use standards so that stuff can talk to one another. But I don't think there's going to be one method that dominates the rest or anything like that.
I think this is clearly the best way to do it. And everything else is a compromise. I like compromise all the time. I don't have the most recent editions. People yell at me because of copyright. But this is how it should be done.
It could be better, or I would like, we never get anywhere, but have them tree bank everything, right? And so like we're pretending this is a Greek text. We're getting to wear our like editor cape and putting this forward as a Greek text. Prove it. How does it work? Right? That would be better. It'd be awesome. And then you could also you could do other things like, you know, de. Like so de, delta, epsilon as a word shows up in my tree bank as a verb, right? Okay, something's gone badly wrong, whether on the manuscript or the transcription, even if it is like that is a legitimate Greek word, but you know, it's either a different word or you know, did the syntax wrong or something. That would be another awesome step. And it's just the stuff's just gonna probably just wait for us to do that. You know?
So who else has actually worked at this level of granularity with their manuscript sources, including things like their little handbooks of abbreviations linked specifically? I mean, people have talked about this for 30 years. I mean, I've seen this a long time. But how many people have actually been building, other people have been creating editions like this?
People are doing it.
I know they are, but who?
You've been to the Schoenberg thing, the annual Schoenberg thing at University of Pennsylvania. Did you go to that?
I haven't been to that. I'm going to be at the Dixit editing thing a week from now.
Okay.
There's the letters thing at Dartmouth. I forget the name.
Oh yeah, the Alchem Letter Project, yeah.
But they're all these independent, autonomous systems. I mean, I guess anybody working for IIF is at some level aspiring to do this. But so now I see it's past 5, so if people have to go, they should go, you know, and have like. But Ricardo, what do you see here when you think about dealing with Arabic and Greek and Aristotle and all the stuff we're thinking about doing down the line?
Well, I see a lot of excitement for me in the years ahead of me. I mean, one of the questions that I wanted to ask is really what the learning curve is for someone who knows nothing about this, like me. I mean, I'm new to this department. I'm very interested in working. Well, I was just thinking when I heard your presentation, I was just thinking of something, you know, small to start with on the Latin side because it would be easier for the students of the language. So, what's the learning curve for someone who's new like me and for the students themselves in order for them to get involved?
Yeah, well, Alex can chime in, but from my perspective, you know, your brain might hurt for 20 minutes, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, if you can decline what's on contract, you can do this. You know?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it's very simple, and with the students, I've never had any problems, and actually, a lot of them just pick it up and run with it and go very, very far. And I think Chris had similar experiences, so it's never been an issue.
It is easier now than I think it's ever been, just because we have better tools.
One of the things that I'm interested in is working on multiple translations of Aristotle. So I wonder whether, I mean, that might make the complexity very sort of grow exponentially. I don't know whether you could actually ever do something that involves, say, comparing the same text on 3 different manuscripts.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. This is really
In 3
interesting.
different languages. I mean, is
No,
there,
I think that
would these tools themselves?
The reason we got the reason we started down the road of building all this stuff was at the outset when we were going to do a Homer multi-text. We knew it's video multi-text. We wanted many versions of the Iliad, and so we knew that we had to build a kind of generic architecture because it was going to be too, you know, we're going to have multiple versions of the Iliad and then quotations of the Iliad embedded in prose works and ultimately translations of who knows what. And so that would be awesome. Giving Aristotle a really good treatment would be awesome.
That's my stuff. So I mean, I would really be excited to do this. And when actually we're meeting tomorrow for some initial training, and when I actually saw that image projected, and you showed us how to tie the transcription to the regions in the image. That was going to be one of the questions that I was going to ask you. So actually now I know you can do this. So it's trivial, and I should have known it perhaps, but it's.
Well, no, I don't think it's trivial, and you know, I'm glad we have Chris here because what you guys did enables then so much more because we got this piece of software from the Homer multi-text guys, and I think, you know, none of
The thing
this
you were
should be
showing,
trivial. So,
that's something that you guys made because it's a lot better than anything.
well, it's only good because you guys.
I'll be
did it
happy to
first
take credit
anyway.
for it. I'm sorry.
But I think none of this is trivial because it's the result of so many people going on, and I think, you know, that's how things get good, right? And we are always at some stage of you know, of this convolution, but that doesn't matter.
Can I ask you one more thing? That's very minor points. Is there a way to deal, for instance, I guess there is, with abbreviations, you know, so you can do that easily?
Definitely.
This is a dream of a child's dream, right? A polyographer's dream or something.
Do you have any of your stuff you did with Monica on text reuse handy that we could see? And then people should go. It's after 5. I'm just like driving Chris while he's here. Because you have the paper on the.
Yeah, I could. That might be actually the quickest thing because I have some of the examples.
Once you show us that, so here are issues about. So now, once you have a text organized like this, the other question is, how do you deal with it when people are citing the Iliad, chunks of the Iliad? It's not the same edition, so it's really quite interesting when you put a word on it. And
So yeah, this is one of the harder problems that we've been thinking about for a long time. So this is text reuse. Let me start with a simpler example. Text reuse, Homeric text reuse in Athenaeus of Naucratus's Deipnos Sophistoi. And so this is a kind of nasty problem, because what Monica's interested in, she's like the greatest living reader of Athenaeus. She's an awesome person, but she's interested not just in direct quotation, but in paraphrase and allusion, including places where Athenaeus talks about stuff that happens in the Iliad using words that are etymologically related to words Homer uses, but that's like the extent of the connection, right? It's like really subtle stuff. And so how to document those relationships between texts without lying or making stuff up or destroying your edition of the text in any way has been kind of a challenge. And so you get things like this. Give a banquet for the elders. It is fitting and not at all unseemly. The tents are full of wine, which the ships of the Achaeans on a daily basis from Thrace upon the wide sea convey. And so that's in the Iliad. This is how it appears in Athenaeus. The rest of you rich men ought to be like that. To those who do not practice such hospitality, one may say, why are you so stingy? Surely your tents are full of wine, spread for the elders a feast, a bountiful one. It is fitting for you. So this is a text reuse, like assembled out of bits and pieces from like all over the Iliad, including one from a totally different passage. The sea comes from down here, and then so we've got this other like sort of Athenaeus thing. Maybe there's not time to talk about in detail about how to do this, but basically if you capture these 6 pieces of information, you're good. There's 6 pieces of information that you need to capture, and I think we're pretty confident that the result says precisely what we want it to say, keeping the integrity of the Iliad and the integrity of Athenaeus intact. Lets us express the subtleties of the text reuse while still allowing people to navigate between the specifics of the 2 texts. And so I was able to send 3 of my students to Leipzig this summer, and they, Monica chained them to a table, and they went through and did this. But that was, talk about a thing that is not currently visualizable, right? They were just making these massive columns with stuff like this in it, and we'll figure out later how to visualize it. But I think so. What you're talking about with Aristotle, I think would be a lot of that kind of thing. The same approach should be translation alignment.
Yep.
This allows for like non-contiguous selections, excluding verba dicendi from quotations, and so this. I mean, I'm excited to hear your Aristotle ideas because
yeah, and I work also on the commentary tradition in Latin and Arabic. So I mean that seems to be exactly the sort of things that rang a bell. I mean,
yeah,
Lemata,
Aristotle
multi-paraphrases. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Oh man, yeah.
Man, that would be.
I'll be dead by the time it gets done. So
Right.
I can start.
Die happy.
I can start with a small pilot and then see how it goes. It will be wonderful.
Well, and your students can continue.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, exactly.
So here, I mean, editors, I mean, the significance is high. I mean, your editors, as I understand it, have normalized quotations of Homer that show up in things like Athenaeus to make it accord with their critical edition as opposed to preserving the difference that shows up there. You have now designated this as a separate, its own sort of fragmentary edition of Homer.
Yeah, that's right. So at the end of the day, you can read your Iliad skipping from place to place, read in your Iliad text, like just the bits that Athenaeus reuses in one way or another. You can read Athenaeus going just from the Homeric text reused the other way, or you can make like the Iliad of Athenaeus, and you can have it in Iliad order or Athenaeus order.
That's interesting.
Really incoherent either way, but and it's all just all the eating stuff, right? It's all fish in bowls. So.
Well, I mean, that's interesting because I know a guy who's worked for like the past 10 years on eating in Homer. So
yeah.
There you have it, right? So it actually answers questions right there.
And the short version is you've got the shortest possible version. This identifies a span of text in Athenaeus from a beginning point to an ending point and everything in between it. This identifies a big chunk in the Iliad, and and everything in between it. And then this is where you call out just the stuff we care about, right? So this tells you the truth about Athenaeus. This tells you the truth about the Iliad, and this is our analysis, our analyzed text, I think we call it, right? And so that's actually not that complicated. Like here's this, and here's how we deform it for this analysis. So our new chosen vocabulary text information. Should do Theophrastus too.
Well, that might become part of the picture.
Yeah.
But my heart lies with that.
Yeah, when you get to I taught Aristotle's Poetics in Greek, Arabic, and Latin at one point, because that you have the transmission of we are reading Ibn Rushd's commentary on Aristotle's Poetics, where there were no cultural references to explain what tragedy and comedy was. So he translated his blame and praise poetry and replaced all of Aristotle's quotations with Arabic quotations. But that was a version of, and then there was the nice translation, William of Morbec's Latin translation, which is actually straight from the Greek. There's like 2 manuscripts of that. Nobody read it. Everybody read Ibn Rushd's commentary, explaining what Aristotle meant, because they could understand the Arab, the Muslim Arab. They couldn't understand the guy translating from the Greek. It's too alien.
That's absolutely true. I confirm.
Okay. Thank you.